No, that's what a debt exclusion is for a particular purpose, and it stays with the particular purpose, I believe.
So that purpose goes away.
Yeah, the 2.5 just stays on the tax levy year after year. It never goes away. And the debt exclusion, I think, it goes away after you pay for the project that it was raised for.
And well, and I understand those 2 points, but that's still not answering my question. What I'm asking.
Are you asking that if it gets earmarked year after year, the 2.5 override?
The portion that represents the 2.5 override. Okay, let's say in year one of a 2.5 override, a successful 2.5 override vote, $500,000 extra is raised.
Mm-hmm.
In that first year, that money has to be used in the way in which the 2.5 override vote information was presented to the people of the city. So it needs to be spent the way it was described to be. We need this for XYZ, right? But after that first year, it can be spent in any number of different ways.
Yes.
And I was told that and that's all true. But I was told that it wouldn't be part of the regular budget that the city council would control. It would be part of money that would be at the discretion of the executive branch alone to be utilized in those years.
I don't think that's true. I think it's just,
that's not true.
I think it just goes into the big pot that gets put into the budget.
It gets put into the budget. Okay.
I believe so. I'm not a financial guy. You should have given me my homework before we went on.
No. Well, no. This is okay that this is happening in the middle of a podcast, because that's what this podcast is all about. Like we need to get a definitive answer on that. I would be inclined to think that it goes into the general budget, but I bring this up because the next thing I'm going to say is an example of, I had been conflicted by this several years ago. I'm a major proponent of fine and performing arts education. I'm a major proponent of public education as a whole, and particularly that it is comprehensive in its curricula, and that it is as in every way, shape, or form, personnel-wise, curriculum-wise, administrative-wise, as robust as possible. With that said, 2.5 overrides can be a tricky thing. Because after you've saved whatever programs you saved in that first year, the money can go anywhere. It's not just continuing to be part of the budgets of the departments or the programs in which it was intended in that first year to be saved. And for that reason, I have a problem with that. And I remember receiving the ire of many of my normally supportive peers and friends, because we all kind of sort of think alike as to how public funds need to be allocated, because I wanted to talk about that process first. And most other folks said, look, man, who cares as long as we get, another year through with no one getting cut. And you can't do that, because sooner or later, as you break down process, that bites you in the ass. These same shortcuts to process that work in your favor this year might completely be used against you in 7 years from now. You know what I mean? Like, we are a system of laws and processes, and they need to be adhered to and thought of. This is a case where they need to be thought of for the future.
So this is why we have a democracy, right? And especially now with this election, you hear a lot of people say, well, it's a constitutional republic. It's not a democracy. It's a democracy. It's also a constitutional republic, but we're set up on democratic principles. Guided as a democracy. We have a little bit of a republic in that we have ward councilors that have the same weighted vote as at-large councilors do, but it's a democracy. And in a democracy, if something like that happens, you just don't vote for the mayor after that. So if the mayor says, "Oh, we're going to have this great program, we're going to do a Proposition 2.5, so we can fund this program, and then we'll always have the money there every year to keep the program going. And then in 2 years, the program disappears. The mayor should disappear. And that's why we have a democracy. So people got to go out and vote. That's what I always say. The people own the government. They ought to act like they own the government.
Or they acquiesce when they don't get engaged.
Yeah, people have to pay. But like, I have a loud mouth. I'll probably pay one of these days. I won't get reelected. Whatever, that's fine. That's what democracy is for. But if people went out there and and spoke with their vote, things would change at the top. So that, like, something like that should never happen. And if it does, boot the guy out or the girl out, right? That's why we have a democracy. And that's why in Gardner and Hawk and Flick tried to change this years ago. They hate the city charter. Flick and Hawk hated the city charter because it wasn't free enough for the executive to do everything he wants. See, you had this stupid thing called the city council that used to get in his way all the time. So one of the things they wanted to do, Flick, wanted to make the mayor's term 4 years. And after that, they would have made it 6 years and 8 years and probably 10 and 12 years. But even if it goes from 2 years to 4 years, like, they wouldn't have stopped. You know how people like that are. Once they get something, they just have to keep going. So if the mayor got 4 years, more of that would happen. They would just, nobody's going to remember this in 4 years. But every 2 years, everybody's memory is pretty sharp still in 2 years. So if something like that happened, you just get voted out, you know? That's democracy.
Yeah. Right.
So that was another thing good about, and we're going to have another war. You mark it, we're going to be famous for me saying this right now. When Mark Hawk left, he said, I still hate the city charter, and we have to go to a city manager form of government in Gardner. And you're going to see that. I would expect any day now something's going to come through, and somebody's going to try to change. Me and Jim Walsh were big champions of the city charter, and I think he still is. I know I am. I think it's perfect, and I think it's great. I think it's genius, actually. But the thing is that they're going to try to change it. They're going to try to put the auditor, the treasurer, and the clerk under the mayor's domain. City council's not going to have any domain. Mayor's going to be 4 or 6 years. City councils will probably be 1 year. But you watch. I don't know what all the provisions or what the changes might be, but it's going to happen. There's going to be a charter review, I bet. I don't know. I'm just saying I have that intuition.
You've heard it here first, folks. A prediction by Scott J. Graves. Let's hope that that doesn't happen. Let's not worry about if it happens, but let's agree that when it happens, that people get fully engaged.
Exactly.
And are ready to really seriously consider the merits or demerits of their existing city charter.
Yeah.
And plan accordingly. I do have one thing we should change about it.
What's that?
You want to hear what I think, Scott Graves?
Yeah.
I think we need to have a provision in there of what to do and to fight against people being voted for mayor and then quitting. We got to do something about that. Like, if you're going to quit, you just quit and then you leave. Like, you can't just stay around for a little while and, all that kind of stuff.
Well, no.
It's silly. Another discussion for another day.
But let me just say quickly on that. That's not the charter's fault. That's the human's fault. When a normal person quits, they pack their stuff up. They go to their brand new job. Especially when it was a voluntary quitting, right? And a normal person just says
versus an involuntary quitting. I believe that's called getting fired. That didn't happen.
Well, you know how people say, I want you out of here, but on your resume, we'll just put that you quit or you resigned, whatever you call it. But, so some people don't voluntarily quit, they involuntarily quit.
Sure.
But in that sense, you just pack up and you leave. This was a quagmire that was invented by John Flick, that whole thing. That was all invented. There were so many easy resolutions to that. There was so many.
By the way, the best scenario when you quit is that you still get paid for a while, and then you quit. I don't know if that's technical terminology, but
say that again.
I said the best scenario when you quit is when you quit, but they still pay you for a while. It's like Office Space. You ever seen the movie Office Space?
No.
In that case, he didn't quit. They fired Melman or whatever his name is. But he was still working. He went to work every day, but he stopped getting paychecks. And they were like, well, don't tell him that he has to leave or anything. It's just, it'll work itself out. He just
wasn't getting paid. It was the opposite of what Hawk did.
We did the opposite. Mayor Hawk quit, but then we kept paying him for a while.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty good.
Well, he had a legal opinion from John Flick saying he could do that. I mean, you can't blame that on the city charter. Flick exploited every loophole possible in that city charter and created loopholes in that city charter to do to pave the way for Hawk to do what Hawk did. There's no doubt about it. And if anybody wants to read about it, they can read about it. It was unbelievable.
We've got a future. We keep having these like moments of future podcast episode, but we should do it. Should be like an after school special, like they used to do in the Constitution and stuff. We could have like a city charter. We could make songs, how a bill becomes a law, all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, but that was you can't don't blame that one on the city charter. That was human error, and that was human error. Let's put it that way.
Well, you have. I want to thank you for. We've had a great discussion tonight. I feel like we haven't solved all the world's problems, but we certainly have accomplished a lot as a podcast.
We'll expound on some of it.
That I would love to do that and just explore the charter and so forth, and maybe even at some point in time we should explore parts of the state constitution stuff. These are documents that they truly rule over many of the processes that we interact with every single day, living here in Commonwealth and living here in the city of Gardner, and yet they're not. We never learn about these documents.
Exactly. We're all gonna be learning about an aspect of it very shortly. In the Mass Constitution, which is the meat and potatoes of the Mass Constitution, is called the Mass Declaration of Rights, is where all rights are. But it's fascinating because the Massachusetts Constitution predates the United States Constitution.
Correct. John Adams wrote the draft of it, and then it was finally approved in 1780. But he wrote it in 79, I think the summer of 79, when he was back from France briefly.
Yeah, and if you look at the Federalist Papers, the founding fathers of the United States Constitution used part of the Massachusetts Constitution as a template. It was an act of genius by John Adams, but it's the longest running, if you want to use that word, Constitution in the world. The Mass Constitution.
That's correct.
Ongoing.
Did you know that he wrote, you may recall a couple of years ago, I actually mentioned this when I spoke at a city council meeting I can't remember the section of it, but I did quote entirely from it. It's one of the few constitutions when he mentions the necessary of a public education system. He lists out all of the specific curricula or disciplines that he said that would be required of an education system in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and he lists the fine and performing arts, and he separates them, just to be clear, because the arts at that time could also mean the mechanical arts, it could mean technology, it could mean certainly engineering. He lists them out separately so that they are there, and then he goes on to say, may children enjoy the fruits of a modern peaceful society to become sculptors and painters and poets and yada 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 yada. And of course, more commonly, people would ask him, what is the fight about? And he would say, so I'm a diplomat during war, so that my children can be statesmen, and so that their children can be artists and great thinkers. I'm paraphrasing there, but
where did he write that?
The quote or the section of the Constitution?
Oh, that's the section of the Constitution.
No, the latter part I just very inelegantly quoted, and it's really just paraphrasing, is something that he commonly would say, and that shows up and it shows up over the years in his diaries at least twice in variation. The first part, though, is the fact that the fine and performing arts are listed as a discipline in the Constitution of the state. That's truth, and I think it could be section 13. I can't remember what section it is, but it's in the Constitution. He very consciously mentions it. And I've, for years as a music educator, had said, it's in our state constitution. We are mandated. If we believe we're also mandated to teach English and we're mandated to teach mathematics because it's listed in the Constitution, fine and performing arts can't be cut. It is listed in our state constitution. Of course, people forget the details of their own legal documents. And as over the years, as I've said to influential people, this is a means by which you could fight for these
definitely
programming. that people are always like, oh, but no one's going to believe that, or it doesn't seem like a worthy path for them.
I'm sure somebody's tried that if it's in the Constitution as a mandatory requirement. I'm sure somebody's filed a suit.
Or they interpret his words to mean that it's a should and not a have to, or any number of different things. Because I'm sure that there are other facets of things requiring money that are in the state constitution that from time to time people decide, well, we're going to interpret this a different way because we don't want to pay for it.
By the way, did you know, it's one of the things I was working on earlier on, that in the city of Gardner, according to the law department, shall is not a mandatory word. Shall means may.
Really?
Yeah.
Is that any different from any other legal?
That's preposterous, by the way, but it's in writing.
Wow.
Shall doesn't mean shall anymore. You didn't know that?
I did not know that. Well, maybe quit doesn't mean quit anymore.
It doesn't. As a matter of fact, in that situation, quit meant nothing. It had resign. John Flick said resign. The word resign was the legal term of art. And it was whenever Mark Hawk felt like resigning, that was when it mattered as a matter of law. Quitting didn't mean anything. It didn't matter if you came to work ever. You didn't have to be physically present. Nothing mattered. All that mattered was when Hawk decided that it was time for him to resign. And that's nowhere to be found in any case law or any legal authority whatsoever. It was just basically made up. And the thing was, there was no other alternative. And get this, Flick put in writing that Hawk could have kept the mayor's title for 2 full years because he had just won that election. So Gardner would have went 2 years with no acting mayor and no mayor, no executive whatsoever. And Flick said that's what the city charter requires.
It's just unheard of in any other sector of American life. You just it wouldn't, even what happened in real life wouldn't have been tolerated. But to think that it could have gone on for 2 years is like, man, that's like an unreality. I mean, how does that happen?
We'll get into it when we talk about separation of powers again. But in Gardner, we have a pseudo third branch, and that's John Flick. John Flick is the judicial branch in Gardner. And when John Flick...
As solicitor, yeah.
Oh, no. When he issues a legal ruling, it's concrete. It's as good as if a judge stamped it, right? In Gardner, it is. Which, that's insane because he's an unelected employee, not held accountable to the people, never got elected in his life. And here's the thing.
Have you ever noticed that he looks like a slightly shorter version of Rudy Giuliani? No, I'm just kidding.
I don't know.
I'm just being petty. I'm sorry.
But here's the thing.
And we've got to wrap it up too, because
if you want to challenge the legal ruling of John Flick, which I've done before, you literally have to go to Worcester Superior Court. Imagine that. And then of course, you know what the courts say? We defer to the local council. It's right. Unbelievable.
Please leave our chambers, small town people. Why are you bringing this to us?
A judge with a black robe says, well, that's up to the city solicitor. What?
It's like bringing Jesus to to Babylon, or he's yours, Herod. No, you take him.
That's why you have to wonder if somebody, an unelected employee that has that much power like John Flick, should just be the perpetual department head forever and ever and ever. Like he's going to be the city solicitor forever, right? There should be some term limit, it seems to me, because after a while, it's like, you're just getting judicial rulings in the city from one person.
I don't know. I wish he had more rulings coming out on a regular basis. Then we could have a special section of each podcast called the Flick Pick. Is the Flick Pick, and we could just talk about those things. And he would.
Well, you can talk about the fact that shall doesn't mean shall anymore; it means may.
We can have a whole episode. We're going to have a whole episode on that. And speaking of episodes, we're wrapping this one up. We have talked for about an hour now about the checks and balances, the separation of powers, and why they are important in not only our federal government or state governments, but a little bit about why it's important in our municipal government too. Folks, we encourage you at Scots on the Rocks Politica to get engaged in your municipal government as much as possible. and at the state and federal level too. And as such, I will mention we have a discussion group where you can ask all kinds of questions. You can stump the chumps, if you will, and try to give us really hard questions that we cannot answer. I don't care what you do, but get engaged, and it can start with our discussion group. If you go to our Facebook page, which you'll find at 2 Scots Politica, on Facebook, you'll find not only the page itself, but also the Scots on the Rocks Politica discussion group, where you can ask us all kinds of questions. And for that matter, since it's a discussion group, all the other citizens that are using it as well can sort of chime in on opinions and facts and whatnot related to your question. We also just want to let everybody know you can subscribe to our YouTube page, Scots on the Rocks Politica Podcast. Because there you'll find each one of these podcasts sort of divided up in various ways and placed in video, just in case, you really like to watch. Some people are visual, right, Cam? I mean, they just, it's not good enough to just listen, radio.
Right, some people just don't like to use their ears. They just can only use their eyeballs. Just like
I'm the opposite. I like listening.
Yeah,
Same
right.
here.
Yeah, the medium of radio is so much more personal. You just cozy up to the box and listen,
You can fall asleep with someone whispering in your ear. It's really nice.
Scott J. Graves, as always, it is a pleasure to work with you.
Same here.
Cam McLeod, thanks for being our intrepid producer.
Anytime and every time.
This is Scott M. Graves signing off on episode 7 of Scots on the Rocks Politica. Good night.
Good night.